1587. A desperate man stands alone on a windswept shore, staring at the ruins of his greatest hope. His family is gone. His people, 117 souls, have vanished. The only trace of their existence? A name clawed into the rotting bark of a tree, Croton. No bodies, no graves, no answers, just a silence that has echoed for centuries. This is the enigma of Roanoke, the oldest unsolved mystery in American history. And tonight, we're diving into the shadows. It's August 1587. A ragged group of English settlers, men, women, even newborn babies, step onto the shores of Roanoke Island, a speck of land off the coast of what's now North Carolina. They're here to build a new life, a permanent foothold for England in the Americas. But just 3 years later, they're gone, vanished. Not a single soul remains. No signs of struggle, no graves, no hidden messages, except for 2 faint letters carved into a tree, CRO, and a single word chiseled into the fort's weathered post, Croton. The colony's governor, John White, returns from a desperate supply run to England, only to find the settlement stripped bare. His own daughter, his infant granddaughter, the first English child born in the New World, are nowhere. The homes are dismantled, not burned. The land is quiet, almost peaceful. But the air? Thick with dread. What happened here wasn't a massacre. It wasn't a hasty escape. It was a disappearance so complete, so baffling, that even 435 years later, we're still screaming into the void for answers. This is the legend of the lost colony, a puzzle with missing pieces, a crime scene without bodies, a story that's equal parts history, horror, and heartbreaking mystery. Tonight, we're untangling one of America's oldest cold cases and asking the question that's haunted generations. How does an entire civilization simply evaporate? Let's rewind to 1587. The English are desperate. Spain dominates the New World, and Queen Elizabeth I is determined to plant England's flag on American soil. Enter John White, artist, explorer, and now governor of a bold new venture. With 115 settlers, including his pregnant daughter Eleanor and her husband, White sets sail for Roanoke Island, a strip of land nestled in the wilds of present-day North Carolina. Their mission: establish England's first permanent colony, a fresh start, a foothold in an untamed world. But from the beginning, the odds are against them. The settlers arrive too late in the season to plant crops. Supplies dwindle. Relations with the Second tribe, once cautiously friendly, fray into suspicion. A colonist is killed harvesting wild nuts. Then, a brutal twist. White's daughter gives birth to a baby girl, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. But joy is short-lived. With food nearly gone and tensions exploding, White makes an impossible choice. He'll sail back to England for reinforcements and supplies. A 6-month trip, he promises. He kisses his daughter and granddaughter goodbye. It's the last time he'll ever see them. But fate has other plans. War erupts between England and Spain. Every ship is commandeered to fight the Spanish Armada. White is stranded for 3 agonizing years. When he finally returns in 1590, Roanoke is empty. The houses are gone, dismantled, not destroyed. No bloodstains, no weapons, just overgrown fields and an unsettling quiet. His granddaughter, Virginia, the symbol of this New World dream, has vanished with the rest. The only hints of their fate? 2 cryptic carvings, CRO etched into a tree and Croton on a fort post. No cross, the agreed-upon signal for danger. Just a name, a clue, a riddle. What White must have felt in that moment, grief, guilt, terror, we can only imagine. But one thing's clear. This wasn't a hasty retreat. It was a deliberate disappearance. The settlers didn't flee. They melted into the unknown. The question is why and how? But here's where it gets stranger. The settlers didn't just disappear. They left behind a trail, or maybe a trap. Let's start with the carvings. When John White stumbled onto the abandoned colony in 1590, he found 2 chilling messages. The first, CRO carved into a tree. The second, etched into a wooden post at the heart of the settlement. Croton. To us, it's just a word, but to White, it meant something. Croton was the name of a nearby indigenous tribe, and their island, just 50 miles south of Roanoke. Now, here's the thing. Before White left for England, he'd made a plan with the settlers. If they were forced to flee, they'd carve a Maltese cross into a tree, the signal for we're under attack. But there was no cross, no sign of violence, no hastily buried bodies, just those 6 letters. Croton. a word that sparked debates, theories, and nightmares for centuries. Was it a distress signal, a breadcrumb trail, or a deliberate misdirection? Let's break it down. First, the obvious theory. Maybe the settlers went to Croton Island. It makes sense, right? The carving points to a location. The Croton tribe had interacted with earlier English expeditions. Some were even friendly. In fact, one Croton leader, Manteo, had traveled to England and returned as a liaison. He'd been baptized, spoke English, and helped negotiate peace between settlers and tribes. So if the Roanoke colonists were starving or under threat, maybe they sought refuge with Manteo's people. But here's the problem. When White saw Croton, he wanted to sail there immediately. He begged his crew to go south, but a hurricane was brewing. The ship's captain refused. They turned back to England, and White never got another chance to search. Later, in the 1600s, English colonists in Jamestown heard rumors of white people living among indigenous tribes. One account claimed a chief had ancestors who could speak from a book, possibly English. Another mentioned a tribe with gray-eyed members, a rare trait among indigenous people. Even the name Croton resurfaced generations later in surnames like Sampson and Berry among local tribes. But evidence? Hardly any. In the 1930s, a stone was found 200 miles inland, carved with a rambling message. "We fled to escape enemies. Buried treasure here." It was signed Eleanor Dare, John White's daughter, but experts quickly debunked it. The writing didn't match 16th century English. Then, in the 1990s, archaeologists discovered European artifacts, a sword hilt, a ring, English coins in a Croton village site. But none could be definitively tied to the lost colony. So, was Croton a red herring? Maybe, because here's another twist. The Secotine tribe, Roanoke's closest neighbors, were hostile. Earlier settlers had burned their villages and kidnapped their leaders. By 1587, trust was shattered. So, if the colonists didn't go to Croton, what if Croton was a warning? A last-ditch effort to blame another tribe for their disappearance? Or a desperate cry for help, misunderstood by history? And what about the dismantled houses? If the settlers left in a panic, why carefully take apart their homes? Why not flee with only what they could carry? Unless they planned to rebuild elsewhere. Maybe they split into smaller groups. Some went to Croton, others tried to sail back to England. Some perhaps ventured inland. But if that's true, why no trace? No campfires? No graves? Then there's the drought. Tree ring data shows the 1580s were some of the driest years in 800 years for the region. Crops would have failed. Water sources vanished. Starvation could have forced the colony to disband. But again, where are the bodies? Mass graves leave evidence. Scavengers leave bones. But nothing. And what about the timing? 3 years is a long time. If the settlers stayed on Roanoke, waiting for White, how did they survive without supplies? If they left, why didn't they carve more clues? A map? A date? Unless they couldn't. Maybe they were captured, enslaved, killed far from the island. But why would attackers remove every body? Hide every scrap of evidence? Here's another angle. What if the settlers did leave with the Croton people, but conflict followed them? In 1607, when Jamestown was founded, Chief Powhatan told the English that he'd slaughtered the Roanoke colonists. He even showed them English-made iron tools as proof. But Powhatan's territory was miles north of Croton. Was he lying to intimidate the new settlers? Or had the Roanoke group split up, some killed, others absorbed into tribes? The lack of a cross is key. No cross meant no emergency. They left voluntarily. But why not leave a clearer message? Gone to Croton, 50 miles south? Unless they were rushed. Or coerced. Or the carvers didn't want to be found. Then there's the zero on the tree. Was it the start of Croton? An abbreviation? Or something else entirely? Crow could mean cross, but there's no cross. It could be shorthand for crops. A note about food? Or maybe it was a distraction. A way to buy time. And what about the storm that forced White to leave? Was it just bad luck? Or fate sealing the mystery? Because that storm didn't just end the search, it buried the truth. By the time anyone returned to the area, decades later, memories had faded. Tribes had been displaced by war and disease. The trail was cold. Centuries later, we're still digging. Literally. In 2015, archaeologists found shards of 16th century pottery at a site called Site X, 50 miles inland. They also discovered a patch of buried slate and a gold ring, possibly Elizabethan. But again, no smoking gun. No 1587 carved into a rock. No mass grave. So let's circle back. The clues are maddeningly vague. Croton points in one direction, but the evidence is circumstantial. The lack of violence suggests a peaceful departure, but the silence afterward is deafening. Maybe the settlers assimilated. Maybe they died slowly. Maybe they were erased. But here's what keeps historians up at night. The colonists included farmers, carpenters, soldiers, people with skills. If they joined the Croton, they'd have introduced European methods, metalworking, building techniques. Yet no tribe in the area showed that leap in technology, unless the knowledge died with them. Or maybe the answer's simpler. Maybe the settlers tried to sail home on their own, got lost at sea, and the Croton carving was just a decoy, a final act of defiance, a way to say, "You'll never find us." But then why leave the word at all? Why not just disappear? The truth is we'll never know. And that's the power of Roanoke. It's not a puzzle to solve, it's a mirror. It reflects our fear of the unknown, our need for closure, and the unsettling reality that history doesn't owe us answers. The settlers didn't vanish. They became ghosts, and ghosts don't speak. All we have is that one word echoing across the centuries, Croton. A name, a question, a mystery carved into the bones of America itself. So, what actually happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? Let's break down the theories, some grounded in evidence, others in pure speculation, and see which ones hold weight and which ones unravel. Theory 1. Assimilation. Let's start with the most hopeful idea. Maybe the settlers didn't die. Maybe they merged. Croton wasn't just a word carved into a post, it was a lifeline. The Croton tribe, led by Manteo, had ties to the English. Manteo had lived in London, spoke the language, and even helped broker peace between settlers and tribes. If the Roanoke colonists were starving or under threat, joining the Croton could have been their best shot at survival. But is there proof? Decades later, Jamestown colonists heard whispers. John Smith, of Pocahontas fame, wrote that a chief named Powhatan claimed to have slaughtered the Roanoke settlers. But other accounts contradicted this. In 1701, explorer John Lawson met indigenous people on Croton Island, modern-day Hatteras, who told him their ancestors had white ancestors who could talk in a book, meaning red. Some had gray or blue eyes. Others carried surnames like Sampson or Barry, names found in the original Roanoke roster. Even today, the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina claims partial descent from the lost colony. Their oral histories speak of fair-skinned ancestors who arrived before Jamestown. But here's the catch. No DNA evidence conclusively links them to the settlers. No 16th century European artifacts have been found in Croton villages. And if the colonists assimilated, why didn't they leave more traces, letters, tools, or stories passed down? Theory 2, bloodshed now, the darkest possibility. Maybe the colony was wiped out. The Second tribe, Roanoke's closest neighbors, had every reason to seek revenge. Earlier English expeditions had burned their villages, kidnapped leaders, and demanded food during droughts. By 1587, trust was broken. If the colonists ran out of supplies, they might have raided Second crops, sparking a massacre. But where's the evidence? No mass graves, no weapons, no scorched earth. Even John White noted the settlement was dismantled, not destroyed. If the Second attacked, why take the time to carefully disassemble houses? Why leave no bodies? Then there's the Spanish angle. Spain, England's bitter rival, had colonies in Florida. They'd heard rumors of Roanoke and might have seen it as a threat. In 1588, a Spanish ship actually sailed near Roanoke to investigate, but found nothing. If the Spanish had slaughtered the settlers, they'd have bragged about it. They didn't. And what about Powhatan's confession? Years later, the chief told Jamestown settlers he'd killed the Roanoke colonists to prevent them from allying with his enemies. He even showed them European iron tools as proof. But Powhatan's territory was 100 miles north of Croton. Why would he hunt settlers so far from his land? Unless they'd split up, some fleeing inland. But again, no bodies, no battle sites. Theory 3, disaster nature doesn't care about human ambition. Tree ring data reveals the 1580s were a nightmare. The worst drought in 800 years gripped the southeast. Crops withered, rivers dried up. Starvation would have torn the colony apart. Desperate people might have eaten anything. Rats, shoe leather, even each other. But if they all died, where are the bones? Mass starvation leaves traces. Animals scatter remains. Yet not a single settler's skeleton has ever been found. Not even a tooth. Disease is another culprit. European illnesses like smallpox devastated indigenous populations. But the Roanoke settlers were isolated. Would a plague kill everyone? And why no graves? Unless the dying buried themselves, which makes no sense. Then there's the failed escape idea. Maybe they built a raft and tried to sail back to England. But with no experienced sailors, a tiny boat, and the vast Atlantic? That's a death wish. Still, in 1590, John White found the colony's boats missing. Did they attempt it? If so, the ocean swallowed them whole. The wild cards and now, the rabbit hole. When history fails, folklore thrives. First, the Dare Stones. In the 1930s, a series of carved rocks surfaced, supposedly written by Eleanor Dare, John White's daughter. They told a soap opera of native attacks, dead settlers, and buried treasure. But experts quickly exposed them as hoaxes. The grammar was wrong. The dates didn't match. A rock even conveniently led to a dead end. Literally a cliff. Then the curses. Local legends claim Roanoke is haunted, that the settlers angered the land's spirits, who erased them as punishment. Even today, visitors report eerie voices, phantom fires, and the ghost of Virginia Dare wandering the woods. And yes, aliens. Because why not? Some claim the settlers were abducted, pointing to the lack of bodies and the strange carvings as evidence. But let's be real. If aliens wanted 16th century English farmers, they've got terrible taste in abductees. The cold truth, so what's the answer? All the theories have holes. Assimilation lacks proof. Bloodshed lacks evidence. Disaster lacks bodies. The wild cards lack sanity. But maybe the truth is a mix. Imagine this. The drought starves the colony. They split up. Some go to Croton, hoping for help. Others head inland, where they're killed or absorbed by tribes. A few try sailing home, vanishing at sea. The carvings were meant to signal their plans, but storms and time buried the truth. Or maybe we're overcomplicating it. The simplest explanation? They went to Croton. They lived there. They died there. But without a time machine, we'll never know for sure. And that's the thing about Roanoke. It's not a mystery to solve. It's a lesson in humility. For all our tech, our DNA tests, our satellites scanning the Earth, some stories stay buried. The settlers didn't just vanish. They became shadows, a reminder that history isn't a puzzle to win. It's a conversation with the unknown. So which theory do you believe? The peaceful assimilation? The silent disaster? The bloody betrayal? Or something we haven't even imagined? The truth is out there. But for now, it's hiding in the lost corners of time. Roanoke isn't just a ghost story. It's not a campfire tale or a Halloween special. It's a mirror held up to our deepest fears, our hunger for answers, and the fragile threads that hold human ambition together. Let's be clear. These were real people. Not characters. Not legends. Eleanor Dare, a mother cradling her newborn daughter, Virginia, in a world that felt like the edge of the earth. John White, an artist turned leader, carrying the weight of 117 lives on his shoulders. Farmers, carpenters, soldiers. People who left everything behind for a chance at something new. And then they became smoke. But why does their disappearance still claw at us, for 135 years later? Let's start with the obvious. It's history's greatest cold case. A puzzle with missing pieces. And humans hate unsolved puzzles. We'll rewrite stories, invent conspiracies, even cling to hoaxes like the Dare Stones, just to fill the void. Because the alternative, the idea that some questions have no answers, terrifies us. But Roanoke matters for reasons far bigger than mystery. This was England's first attempt to plant a permanent colony in the Americas, and its failure shaped history. When Jamestown was founded 20 years later, the shadow of Roanoke loomed large. Settlers arrived paranoid. They built forts first, farms second. They distrusted indigenous tribes, assuming the worst, because what else could explain 117 people vanishing? That fear poisoned relationships, ignited wars, and set a tone of suspicion that stained America's founding. Roanoke also forces us to confront the hubris of colonization. These settlers didn't discover a new world. They stepped into a complex, ancient web of indigenous nations. The Secretan, Croton, and others had been thriving there for millennia. The English didn't bring civilization, they brought chaos. Starving, they demanded food from tribes already stretched thin by drought. When those tribes refused, the settlers saw savagery, not survival. Roanoke's failure is a lesson in humility. The New World wasn't empty. It wasn't theirs to claim, and the land didn't care about their flags or their prayers. But there's something deeper here. Roanoke taps into a universal fear. How do you vanish without a trace? In our modern world, with satellites tracking every inch of the planet, Roanoke feels impossible. We carry phones that pin us to maps. We leave digital footprints with every click. Yet in 1587, an entire community could slip into the void. No tweets, no final letters, just silence. That silence unnerves us. It reminds us how small we are, how easily the world can erase us. And then there's the human cost. Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, became a symbol of hope, then a ghost. Over the centuries, her story was twisted into propaganda. During the American Revolution, she was a rallying cry against British rule. In the 1800s, white supremacists hijacked her legacy, claiming her as proof of Anglo-Saxon roots in America. They threw festivals, erected statues, all while ignoring the truth. Virginia wasn't a myth. She was a real baby, a child who likely died scared and confused, her fate swallowed by time. Today, Roanoke's legacy is a battleground. Archaeologists, historians, and indigenous communities clash over who gets to tell the story. For centuries, the narrative was controlled by those who saw the settlers as heroes and the vanishing as a tragedy. But for the Croton and Lumbee people, this isn't a mystery, it's a lived history. Their oral traditions speak of absorption, not annihilation, of survival, not slaughter. Yet their voices were drowned out, their truths labeled folklore, until recently. So why does it still matter? Because Roanoke isn't about the past. It's about how we handle the past. It's about who gets remembered and who gets erased. The settlers' disappearance forced England to ask, is colonization worth the risk? For the indigenous tribes, it was a warning. These newcomers will keep coming. For us, it's a question. How many stories have been lost because no one bothered to listen? But there's another reason. Roanoke gives us permission to wonder. In a world obsessed with facts and data, here's a blank space. A place where historians and hobbyists stand on equal ground. You don't need a degree to theorize about Roanoke, you just need curiosity. That's why it's inspired novels, TV shows, and endless YouTube videos like this one. It's a sandbox for the imagination, a reminder that history isn't just dates and dead kings. It's flesh and blood and mystery. And let's be honest, we see ourselves in the lost colony. How many of us have chased a dream that turned to dust? How many have stood at a crossroads, forced to choose between danger and the unknown? The settlers gambled everything and lost, but their gamble wasn't unique. It's the story of immigrants, explorers, and anyone who's ever dared to start over. Roanoke is a monument to human grit and human fragility. But here's the twist. The real tragedy of Roanoke isn't the disappearance. It's the way we've let the mystery overshadow the people. We've turned Eleanor Dare, Virginia, and John White into plot devices. But they were more than that. They were parents, children, friends, people who laughed, prayed, and probably complained about the weather. When we reduce them to a riddle, we repeat the same sin that erased them in the first place. We forget their humanity. So what's the takeaway? Roanoke teaches us that history is messy. It's not a textbook, it's a conversation, a debate, a scream into the void that sometimes, just sometimes, the void screams back. The settlers didn't vanish. They became stories. And stories don't die, they evolve. They challenge us. They force us to ask, what happens when the trail goes cold? When the evidence crumbles? When all we have is a name carved into a tree? Maybe the answer isn't in the past. Maybe it's in us. In our refusal to let go. In our need to keep asking, what if? Roanoke endures because it's not just about 1587. It's about 2023. It's about every time we stare into the unknown and whisper, tell me your secrets. The settlers may be gone, but their silence, it's louder than ever. In the quiet woods of Roanoke Island, the past is never truly gone. Walk those shores today, and you'll feel it, the weight of centuries pressing down. The rustle of leaves sounds like whispers. The wind carries names, Eleanor, Virginia, Croton. For over 400 years, this place has been a question mark etched into history. And today, the search for answers isn't over. It's evolved. Archaeologists still scour the island with tools John White couldn't have dreamed of. Ground-penetrating radar pulses beneath the soil, hunting for buried timbers or bones. Satellite maps reveal long-lost landmarks invisible to the naked eye. Researchers sift through DNA, hoping to find a genetic thread linking the settlers to modern descendants. But so far, silence. The Earth keeps its secrets. Maybe that's the point. Roanoke isn't a problem to solve, it's a parable. A story about the price of ambition. These settlers weren't heroes or fools. They were human. They gambled everything on a dream that turned to dust. And in their failure, they taught the world a lesson. The unknown doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care about your flags or your prayers. It defines you. But here's the twist. Their disappearance didn't end the story. It ignited it. Roanoke became a warning cry for Jamestown, a plot device for poets, a rallying symbol for revolutionaries, even a tourist trap. Every summer, crowds flock to the Lost Colony outdoor drama, where actors bring the mystery to life under the stars. The settlers failed to build a town, but they built a legend, and that legend forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. For Indigenous tribes, Roanoke isn't a mystery. It's a chapter in a much darker story of colonization and survival. For historians, it's a reminder that the past is never neutral. It's shaped by who tells the tale. For the rest of us, it's a mirror. How many of us have ever felt like those settlers, stranded, scared, staring into an abyss? How many have carved our own croton into the trees of our lives, hoping someone will follow the trail? The truth is, we'll probably never know what happened. And maybe that's okay. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to humble us, to remind us that for all our satellites and science, history is still a story with missing pages. That courage and fear and love, the things that drove the Roanoke colonists, are the same forces driving us today. We haven't changed. We're still chasing horizons, still leaving clues, still vanishing in our own ways into the unknown. So let the debate rage on. Let archaeologists keep digging. Let theorists spin their yarns. Because the power of Roanoke isn't in the answer, it's in the question. In the what if. In the quiet wonder of staring at the stars and admitting, I don't know. The settlers are gone, but their legacy? It's everywhere. In every risk we take, every frontier we chase, every time we carve our hopes into the bark of a tree and pray someone will find them. Roanoke isn't just a colony lost to time. It's a testament to the human spirit, fragile, relentless, and forever hungry for the next chapter. So, what do you think happened? The door is still open. The story isn't over. And somewhere out there in the shadows, the truth is waiting.